disclaimer just before I kind of dig into things. Most of this material is mine, but some of it originally came from the blog by Dr. Noah Kageyama entitled The Bulletproof Musician. So I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. And my second little disclaimer is that this is actually not very heavily researched or dissertation based. It's meant to be very practical from my own experiences and my own research that is applicable to everyone, including non-musicians. So for those of you that don't know me personally, my name is Elizabeth Rosinbum, and I am a professional saxophonist, obviously, and private instructor. I live in Austin, Texas, and have a studio of about 55 students that keep me on my toes for sure. I am a D'Addario clinician, which means that I get to go all around Texas and give master classes on behalf of D'Addario Bruins to middle schools, high schools, and colleges, which is my fun Friday job, as I teach Monday through Thursday and lecture on Fridays. I'm also co-founder of an organization called Saxophone Academy Austin, which provides master classes and workshops and also some competitions for youth in Central Texas. And I'm also a wife and foster mom. So as you can hear, I have a lot going on, both personally and professionally. But one of the reasons I created this lecture is because even though I have lots of business ventures and an entrepreneurial spirit, I actually struggle a lot with anxiety, both personally and professionally. Traditional methods such as, "You're going to be great, I believe in you," are wonderful, but they weren't necessarily helpful to me because musicians are a special breed, and we are designed by our work to be able to say, here are 17 different things about that performance I would love to redo and make better. And that's part of our art, and it's an important way to be. But I was finding that those traditional methods were not really helpful to me, so I wanted to find something that would be. Secondly, I think this is something all of us struggle with in some capacity, and I want to take the opportunity to bring it out in the open and destigmatize it. And third is, as a teacher, I saw my students struggling a lot in competitions that I did back in my youth. And I wanted to find a way to prepare them for those moments where they had a lot of high pressure, having not had many of those high pressure situations, and help them perform at their absolute best. So, we're going to talk about 4 main things today. And also, please interrupt me. I want this to be much more of a discussion than a lecture, so I would love to hear your feedback at any time. Please just jump in. We'll also have some Q&A time at the end as well, but I just wanted to put that out there. So what I hope you'll get from today is 4 things. So understanding fear, both biological and physiological responses. The second is the critical inner voice, which is kind of the inner monologue you have going on at any time, specifically when you're practicing and performing. Third is how to focus, specifically channeling any of your anxious energy into an asset instead of a liability. And fourth, centering, being able to have that focus while being mindful of your body while you're playing. So first we're going to set our mind, and then we're going to set our body. So first, let's all talk about fear, because we all experience this in some way. So for purposes of this lecture, stage fright is the nervous response in anticipation of physical or emotional distress. And from an anthropological standpoint, this makes a lot of sense, because we are wired to have 3 modes: fight, flight, or freeze, which I'll get into in just a moment. And this happens because, as we've evolved, we are wired to worry a lot about public opinion. A lot of the thoughts that I have, and I've heard other people having when they're on stage, are, I'm afraid that I'm going to be bad, and more specifically, I'm afraid that people are going to think that I suck. And by being on stage, being open, whether we're speaking, whether we're playing, our reputation is put in danger in that situation. And I know that may sound really, really strong, but in the moment, we have a lot of that physical anxiety that occurs from this. So a question I have for you guys: when you're anxious, what are some physical symptoms that you feel that go on? For me, it's butterflies. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Heartbeat.
Yep, fast heartbeat. What else?
My face is really hot.
Sweaty or just warm?
Just like warm.
Okay.
Shaking.
Yeah.
So adrenaline flows just coming out. Also, I think everyone's felt their stomachs a little more overactive than usual. Sometimes.
Yeah. Don't eat a burrito.
Right.
Things we've learned along the way. Yeah, so that rapid heart rate, sweaty palms, all of that is our nervous system reacting to what it perceives as a potential threat. So there are chemical reactions that happen in our body to make this occur. And I'm not going to go into this particularly deeply because even though I minored in psychology, I took one class on, neurotransmission, and decided that that's why I was going to minor in psychology and not major in it. But I digress. This is actually how we're wired as people, so it makes sense. So in the performance situation, to take that kind of biological stuff and make it a little bit more practical, we have those three options like I was talking about before. We can either fight, which is perform with confidence, which is what we all want. Flight, which is let our nerves take over. Also happens to get our negative thoughts kind of in that downward spiral as well, which I'll talk a lot about in a minute. Or the third is to freeze. And I feel like freeze for me is most common when I'm doing something from memory and I have that lapse. But I found ways to overcome it, and I hope you will too. So, how many of you would say that you get at least some degree of nervousness while performing? Okay. Those of you that don't, I would love to talk with you and learn about your type B personality. But how many of you would say that in the middle of a performance, maybe after you've made a mistake or something didn't go as planned, you have trouble refocusing? Okay, you've come to the right place then. So, in my experience, this nervousness, I'm not sure how to hold this, and lack of focus is the result of the critical inner voice being really, really out of control. So the critical inner voice is our internal dialogue in our head that's going on while we're performing and practicing. It's going on all the time, but I feel like it's the loudest because we're musicians and we're designed to be very analytical when we're doing those specific tasks. And we all have this inner voice, and it can be a really tremendous asset. Because it helps us be very analytical, it can help us give feedback to ourselves in real time, right? It can help us therefore know what to improve. Can also allow us to hear at a very, very deep level in a way that we would not be able to do if we were not listening back to a recording, let's say. So it can help us recall elements in our practice in our performance. For example, I know I've practiced this making sure I'm thinking about light fingerings. I know I've had a lot, I know I need to bring out this dynamic. I know I need to have this articulation here. It can help us have that recall, which is very important. And it can overall shape our music very, very profoundly. It can help us be very expressive. It can help us connect what we've done in practice to our performance. However, when we're performing, that asset tends to get much harsher. And when it does that, it can be the most destructive, critical thing that we have going on in our brain. Because even though it's an asset, or it can be an asset when we're practicing, when it's harsh and critical and destructive, it goes against everything that you are trying to put out musically and emotionally. So my internal dialogue, which is very fast because I'm trying to talk slowly, but I'm from America, obviously, and the Northeast, and so we talk a lot faster. So my internal dialogue is real fast, but it goes something like this. All right, Elizabeth, here we go. It's going to be the first opening of the piece. Here we go. Okay, things are going great. It's happy. All right, cool. There's a high G. Oh, I didn't really love that entrance of that. It wasn't really awesome. Oh, here comes the dynamic. I didn't really love that. Why were you watching the entrances? Come on, what are you doing? Okay? And hopefully yours is a lot slower, and definitely in your voice, not mine. But here's the thing. How productive and good are you being if that little voice is trying to destroy everything that you are trying to put out into the world? When you listen to it berate you, it will stop you dead in your tracks. And even if you're not on stage, you cannot allow yourself to say those things to yourself. You can't allow yourself to entertain thoughts like, well, why did so-and-so win that job and I didn't? Why is this not coming along? Why am I not getting better? Why did this person get this promotion and I didn't? Do I just suck at this? Do I need to change jobs? I've been working on this for months and it's not coming. So I'm here to tell you, in big red letters, that does not help you. There's a way to be a conscientious, lifelong student of this art, but destruction mentally is absolutely not the key. I think in our field there's a tendency to think that berating ourselves, or at least being hard on ourselves and critical, is a good thing. As in, oh, I'm being good to myself if I tell myself that sucked. Okay, that is very twisted and morphed in that you're not actually being good to yourself if you're telling yourself you're terrible. You're just giving yourself bad information that doesn't make you feel good and want to get better. My point is there's a huge difference between listening to your critical inner voice and analyzing yourself as you prepare mentally and beating yourself down. So I'm going to say that one more time. There's a huge difference between listening to and analyzing yourself as you prepare and mentally beating yourself down. You need to be an exceptional critic of yourself because you aspire to be outstanding. And it's important to have those high standards. I'm not saying that it's not. But you should talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend or even a stranger. Especially when I was in grad school, I would have a lot of undergrads come up to me occasionally because I was kind of the mother hen of the graduate students, being a female saxophonist. And they would come up and say things like, like just when they're having a really hard day. I'm working on this, it's just not coming, I don't feel great about it, I feel like I'm struggling, and I'm not okay. And I would always say to them, genuinely, hey, you're putting in the good work. You're doing all the things you need to be doing. We've all been there. Let's go have a cup of coffee. You're going to be fine. And I always meant it. So why in the world do we talk to ourselves so differently? So how do we silence the destructive part of the critique? First, start tuning into what it says. And I spoke about this a little bit earlier. But ask yourself, would I speak to someone else the way I'm speaking to myself right now? And that's a very, very powerful question. As soon as you start tuning into what that voice is saying, you may be really surprised at what's been going on that you've kind of subconsciously ignored for a long time. I know I was pretty horrified when I started paying attention to it as well. So, ask yourself these two questions. Would I ever speak to someone else the way I'm speaking to myself right now? And secondly, is this how I want to function? In 1 year, 5, 10, 15, 20, am I going to listen back to this recording and still beat myself up for missing that note? Is that what I'm going to be thinking about? Or am I going to be thinking about that performance may not have been my absolute best ever, but look how much I've learned from that. And also, that was one note. You had 20,000 others that were beautiful, right? It's all about how you frame it. And I say this even though it may make me sound like such a happy person, because it's really important to be framing it that way. Is that how you want to function? Do you want to be berating yourself up for something that you did a very long time ago? Do you want to put yourself in that mental prison? And I say prison because that's what it's going to feel like if you stay there. And I know I'm not the only one that shows this field because I love music and I want to share it with people and I want to share my art and I want to make sure that I'm connecting people in that way. And destruction up here is not going to allow me to do that. Secondly, leave no space for that nasty little creature. So, when we're playing, we're thinking about 1,000 things at once. And we're great multitaskers. I love that about musicians. But we're thinking about breathing, fingering, articulation, expression, vibrato, the list goes on and on and on. So if we have that much to think about, we need to leave no room for any thought besides, what am I doing in this exact moment? That way, you won't be able to allow yourself to judge or criticize or compare yourself to anyone else, and it won't allow any past mistakes to cloud your judgment if you are right there, right where you need to be in this moment. So try this method, because chances are this little critical voice has been going on very loudly for several years, and it's not going to be quieted overnight. So I would personify it and address it. I would say, you know what? This audition, recital, rehearsal ends in about an hour. I would love to chat with you then and hear all of your feedback, because I'm very interested in all of it, but right now I'm working. And that may sound a little crazy to you don't have to give it a name or anything, but to personify it that way. But if you address it, I found that's very, very helpful, because if you try to stifle it, it just comes back louder and louder and louder. But if you give it a place, as in, we're going to go through all of these things, but right now I'm working, it helps you be much more present in what you're doing in that way. Third is trust the work. Cultivate grit. I love this word because it implies commitment and resilience. There's a time to woodshed notes and spend 2 to 4 hours a day doing fundamentals, okay? That's important. And in this time of practice, you hold yourself to the highest standards of accountability and you listen fiercely so you can give yourself ways to get better. if you practice those vital musical skills, you're going to be able to recall them even on days, for whatever reason, you wake up and feel off. Because if you know you've done that passage beautifully 300 times, you're going to be able to do that even if you're not feeling well or you're not really feeling with it or particularly inspired in that performance. Additionally, practice with intention. Have a specific goal in mind for that practice session, that 10 minutes of your practice session, that week, that month, that year, and beyond. The goal needs to have 3 things. It needs to be realistic, quantifiable, and attainable. So for example, I'm very good at looking at an entire piece of music I have to learn in about a week. And then I look through all of it and say, okay, I'm just going to do a quick run and see how this kind of feels in my fingers. And then after about 3 minutes, feeling very overwhelmed by how much it doesn't feel like it's in my fingers because I haven't practiced it yet and I haven't broken it down and I haven't been methodical in a way that I'm going to really learn this down the road. So what I found is really, really helpful is I go one measure or one passage at a time because it is realistic for me to get that under my fingers in the next few minutes. It is quantifiable, as in this is how much of the music I've worked on in this section, and it's attainable, as in I know I can do that and then be able to recall it later. So having those 3 qualities about your work is going to be very, very helpful for your productivity because again, it's going to be measurable and help you really see your progress as you're learning new music. Also, don't mindlessly go through passages. I'm very guilty of going through my scales and making a mental laundry list or grocery list of things I kind of have to do. And I realize 20 minutes have gone by and I haven't really been listening to myself because I'm on autopilot because those scales will hopefully make my fingers forever. But we always want to play with intent and emotion so that whether we're in the practice room, kind of going through something that may seem boring or not new to us, or on stage, we're always playing with a lot of expression and creativity. And the last thing is thinking of the big picture. So instead of focusing, whoops, oh no, I'll tell you. Okay, there we go. So instead of focusing on the right now, as in I have to win this audition, I have to nail this performance, there's a really big person in the audience, you have to think about the bigger reason of why you do music in the first place. And I was trying to think of a really good example of this, but it was actually sitting right next to me as I wrote this lecture. So I'm married to a really wonderful man who is a software engineer and also para-triathlete. Don't worry, I had no idea what that was when we first started dating either. A para-triathlete is someone that swims, bikes, and runs with a physical disability. So he's a pretty badass guy, not gonna lie. So one of his dreams when we met about 7 years ago is that he really wanted to be part of the Rio Paralympic Games in 2016. And so that's what his goal was working towards. So he would do software in the morning, and then early morning, late night, he would train about twice a day in all those 3 sports. Long story short, in March of 2016, he was ranked number 22 in the world, which is very impressive, but it wasn't high enough to make the games and he didn't qualify. And that was a really, really hard point in his life and absolutely for our marriage because that was a goal I felt like I shared with him because I wanted that for him so much. So he had kind of the option to either retire and say, okay, this was the dream, it didn't happen, that's okay, I'm going to move on, or to keep training, even though the next Olympics, which are going to be 2020 in Tokyo, he'll be 39 years old and getting a little bit older for what he calls a young person sport. But he kept training anyway, and he decided that was what he wanted to do. So in the past 2 years, since that loss in 2016, he's still been training, he's still been eating really well, doing all the good work that he should. And now he's ranked number 10 in the world, and he's number 1 in the US, which is really amazing, and I'm super proud of him for that. But I say this because I've asked him many times, what made you keep doing it? And especially kind of preparing for 2020. What makes you keep wanting to do this, especially after that really horrible loss? And I swear to you, this is exactly what he said. He said, I didn't let my losses cloud my love of the sport. And I thought that was really, really important. Because if we take our performances, especially the very important ones, and we let that cloud our love of music, we're not going to be at this for nearly as long as we should in life. Okay? So go Rosinbum 2020 Tokyo. But whatever you're facing in that moment of anxiety, you have to frame it in that bigger picture. Because we're all musicians because we love this art, we want to share it, we're really passionate about that. And you can't do that if you're in a place where you're mentally stuck. I love this quote because I think it hit the nail on the head in terms of defining grit, that daily work and perseverance. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the work of Dr. Angela Lee Duckworth, she is wonderful and a very wise woman that I would love to meet. So, grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future day in and day out. Not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years. And working really hard to make sure that future is a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. So to take this all a step further, for those of you that struggle with anxiety to some degree, here's what silencing the critical inner voice can look like in our everyday life outside of being on stage. So my first example, and I think these are pretty universal, but feel free to throw some more at me and I'm happy to give you some feedback. I worry about how much I have to do. As musicians, and especially younger musicians and entrepreneurs, we have 10,000 plates spinning at any given time, whether that be different facets of our job or different pieces that we're doing. So I know I'm not the only one that's felt overwhelmed, but here's how I deal with it. Like I mentioned before, I have a lot of different jobs. Not saying I'm busier than you, but I promise I can relate to it because I get it. I do a lot of different things and have a lot of hookers in the fire. So instead of letting all my tasks spiral into panic, I've had to learn to compartmentalize. I've had to learn to be in this exact moment of where I am. So if I'm teaching, I'm with that student. I'm not thinking about the student beforehand or the student afterward, even though I love them and they're very important. I'm with that student. And when I get an email that something is on fire, I will get to that when I am done this, having set aside time to put out that specific fire. And when I'm home, I'm home. This has taken years to develop, and I'm definitely by any means not a professional at it, but it's been very, very helpful to be, here's where I am right now, and I will put out all those fires, but I can't have that clouding my energy right now. I need to do that at a different time, because I can't be doing 7 things at once well. It's just not possible. Another example, I'm afraid that a new venture is not going to go well. And I say a new venture, but it can be anything. A performance, a new job, life change, whatever, is not going to go well. So whenever I have doubt about something, I put a radical truth on it. A few years ago, I decided to start in Austin a saxophone ensemble for middle schoolers. And it kind of sounded probably what you thought it would sound like. It was very near and dear to my heart. But before it was starting, I was a little nervous as it was getting closer. Are kids going to actually register for this? And then our parents are like, people going to come to a little concert, even though it's free, but you know, it's a special person, as we all know, to hear middle school saxophone. They're a tender group. I love them very much, but they do not sound like me. So I had to throw some radical truth on that as I was fearing, you know, the outcome of having that entrepreneurial venture. And so my radical truth was, I know that I've put in all the work I can. I am prepared as prepared as I could have been. I've done all the research to figure out how to do this really well. I've done all the arranging, and regardless of whether or not people come, that has no reflection of me as a human being. And you have to have something that's really rooted like that you can truly believe, not some just, you know, what's the word I'm thinking of? Platonic, not platonic. Just some, you know, condolence that you don't actually really believe. It has to be something that you know at your core so that it can be louder than the fear that you have. So now that we've all silenced the critical inner voice, or at least made it a lot softer, hopefully, I want to talk about how to focus. So we can't control the biological responses that we have, even though we can learn how to lessen them, but we can channel any anxiousness in a positive way so that our fear doesn't let us spiral out of control and lead to a sense of overwhelm and paralysis. So, centering is a highly effective means of channeling your nerves productively and directing your focus even in extreme situations. And I'm happy to go back to all of this or send you my slides if I'm going through this too fast. So, those of you that are typing, thank you, but I'm going to move on for now. By doing this, we're able to achieve what's called flow. Flow is a relaxed state of mind where the performer is energized and deeply involved in the music while skills are executed automatically. This is something referred to in sports psychology as being in the zone. You want to be so involved in what you're doing at this exact moment that you don't notice anything else going on around you. Being in the zone requires 100% of your attention on what's immediately in front of you and involving the task at hand. And like everything else we do, this takes practice to really get good at, to get in this mindset and then stay there. So the first step to centering and ultimately achieving flow is to read mindfully. Do I have any Cinta students in the house? Just me? Okay. Cinta, Donald Cinta. Oh, students of Donald Cinta. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to study with Carrie Kaufman for 1 year in my undergrad, who was lovely, and she's very, very big on breathing. Actually, right after this, I'm going to try and finish early. She's going to do some yoga, which is going to be magical, so let's all try and do that. She's very big on breathing mindfully, and so she talks about the 3 types of breath. Clavicular, which is what we have when we're nervous, where we get that really shallow breathing, okay? Or if you're like me, when you try to run alongside your husband and realize you are not the same as an athlete in any realm. Second is kind of the middle breath, which I think is most of our default as we're playing, because we've talked a lot about deep breathing. But the ultimate breath that gets all 3 parts of the lungs, that's going to be your deepest breath, is from the diaphragm. Okay, we've all heard that before as saxophonists. And so she calls it, and I think this is actually directly from Dr. Cinta, which is why I asked if anyone was a student of his, is called the how breath. And you breathe in by actually saying how. So it has the diaphragm, middle, and high. So, and you can do it without having the whole dolphin thing. But I love that breath because breathing deeply and breathing from that diaphragm helps calm our fight or flight state, because it relaxes the sympathetic nervous system that's causing some of those butterflies and sweaty palms. It also makes you play better too, so that's always a bonus. Second is to scan and release excess tension. So for those of you that practice Tai Chi, let's practice together, number 1. But Chi is described in Eastern philosophy as the life force. So they're opposing forces of yin and yang, darkness and light, and they're kind of always in constant battle. But when they're working together in just the right way, it's the idea of achieving inner harmony and peace. So to put a more Western translation on that, our Chi is our center of gravity. Okay? And merely being aware of any muscle tension in our body and then systematically trying to release it means the ability to control it. So if you're able to identify that you have tension in your shoulders, tightening and then gradually releasing them, you're going to be able to help calm that fight or flight stage, and also being able to know that that's something I need to work on to make sure that I'm staying relaxed, because my tension tends to be in this part of my body. So to demonstrate this, I need a volunteer. It's okay, it's real early. Okay, come on up. So, if you could be here, we're going to do like a Superman arm. Okay, so like that. Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her to just kind of systematically relax different parts of her body, and I want you to give me all of it. Okay? So relax your fingers, and your wrist, and your forearm, and your elbow, and your upper arm, and your shoulder. Good. So now I let go. I don't want you to change anything. Okay? Okay. Now we're going to switch places. Can you do it to me?
Right.
So I'll kind of guide myself.
All right. So on fingers. Okay. Wrist.
Forearm.
Forearm.
The elbow.
And shoulder.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
I couldn't understand your little, when you said, what was the last thing you said?
I'm going to let go.
I'm going to let go, okay.
Yeah. But you see the difference in tension, yes? Okay. And this is obviously easier to do if you can understand what I'm trying to say. I'm talking too fast, but there we go. So again, being aware of that is very, very helpful in our performance setting. You can do this with all different parts of your body. I just find that kind of Superman arm to be the easiest visual for you guys to try out also. So, next, establish a focal point. This is especially important if you're playing from memory, and it's one of the first times you're playing from memory as well. Because establishing a focal point helps minimize distractions, both of things around you and also of sounds. So for those of you that haven't memorized music, I find 3 places on my stand to be most helpful. And this is just me. It's very variable, but kind of try these to start. The first place I'll look, or one of my focal points, can be kind of the top margin of the paper. I just draw a little dot or a smiley face or something, or give myself kind of like a word or a phrase that I get excited about to look at. Second could be the middle of your music. Could be as small as a note head, just something for you to be very, very focused on. Or at the bottom of the music stand, which will help minimize you seeing kind of the audience that could spark some of those butterflies. You could also just look into the center of the audience. But the point is, give yourself an actual place of, here's where I'm going to focus to help eliminate kind of the white noise going on around you as you're practicing or performing. Regardless of where your focal point is, make sure it's not in the middle of a really tough section that could trigger some anxiety. So, fourth, make a very specific goal statement. So I'm going to call this a process cue. It's forming a very clear intention. You want to be very, very specific in what you want to do. You want to make sure you're using positive declarative language. Not I hope, I will. And that's very, very important. Because your brain responds to don't, never, avoid, kind of those words more than it will respond to what you're actually wanting it to do. Don't think of an elephant. Now we're all thinking of an elephant. So instead of don't miss the high note, nail the high note. And flipping that on its head, now we're excited to hit that high note and we're ready for it. Versus don't, you know, you're welcome for that. I didn't intend to do that, but that's okay. Having that very, very specific goal is very important. It should also not be result-oriented, as in, I hope to win this competition, or I hope to win this job. And the reason I say that, even though results are important, and I'm not diminishing their worth, if the result is subjective or out of your control, it's not something that should be your goal. Your goal should be on what you can do, what you can communicate, what you can therefore put out, regardless of people's perception of it, okay? And then, I actually already talked about this, the positive versus negative. So you want to have that positive spin on it because it's very important. Focusing on what you want and not what you don't want. So remember, the goal is to make the process cue very specific for you and the piece of music that you're playing. Okay? And everybody's process cue is going to be a little bit different. So for me, one of my all-time favorite pieces is the Mislanka Sonata. And I don't care how many people think it's just a first immersion minor chord over and over. I think it's beautiful and I love it. And one of the things I think about, my analytical part of my brain is thinking a lot about the pitch in the first few notes. But the other, I guess, more creative part of my brain is thinking a lot more about how I want this to spin and what I want to communicate. Because what I love about Mislanka's music is it has so much soul, and I'm trying to think of how I can make that happen. So my process cue would be something about how, I want this to float, I want this to spin, I want this to sing right here, and I'm thinking of the phrase in my head to allow myself to do that. For some of you that are a little bit more analytical than me, which is totally fine, you might want to find an adjective to describe what you're trying to get across. This is going to be fierce. Now, I want this is going to be fierce, powerful, in control. You may have to drum up an adjective or a phrase that works for you. I was talking with a friend about this yesterday, and he had a really interesting process cue, which I thought was beautiful. Whenever he gets nervous, he writes on the top of his paper something that is really, really specific to him about a person he loves in his family that helps him kind of be really calm and remember kind of why he does music in the first place. And I thought that was really powerful, so I wanted to share it. So the energy you feel in the room, whether that's in the warm-up room or like right as we're about to walk on stage, is something that you have the ability to control. As in, you may not be able to totally calm the butterflies, but you can channel that kind of anxious energy into something positive. So 3 words you don't use anymore: anxious, worried, nervous. You want to replace those with things that are going to be much more positive. And I have a few examples up there. Bold, calm, confident, fearless. And my favorite one is excited. I'm feeling this energy because I'm excited to share what I've practiced. I'm excited to share all the good work that I've done. I know I've put in all the time. I'm ready. I'm as prepared as I can be. So let's go now play this for the people that are listening, that are about to be listening. And you may have to repeat that about 37 times in order for you to believe it. Because I used to get really frustrated when I first started doing this, because I would say it once, and then by the 4th time I'd be like, it's not really sinking in yet. But like everything else, this takes practice to really get kind of focused on what's going on internally, and then be able to control that mentally. And then once you walk on stage, you are right there. You're not thinking about what your dress looks like, or if your shoes untied, or kind of any of that, just stuff that kind of can go through our head. You need to be right there in the moment, in that phrase, really, really involved in what you're doing, which I talked about a little bit earlier. So to review, here are all the steps in sequence. First is to breathe mindfully, again, breathing from that diaphragm breath, which helps calm our anxiousness. Second, scan and release excess tension, being aware of anywhere you have tension by systematically tensing body parts and then gradually releasing it can help get rid of any of that extra energy. You can also do that systematically, from crown to toes or toes up, your preference, but making sure we kind of check on all those points. Third is to establish a focal point where you're actually going to be visually looking to minimize distractions. Fourth is forming a clear intention, exactly what you want, not what you don't want, exactly what you want to communicate, exactly how you want to sound. And the last is directing your energy. So at first, this process may take 5 to 10 minutes. But after about 2 weeks of practice, you can be able to recall all these steps in about 5 to 10 seconds. And I say this because I get very frustrated that my brain doesn't want to turn off. And I tend to try something and then get frustrated that it's not necessarily working as fast as I want it to. But I say this because, like everything else we do, being able to do this takes a lot of practice, so be patient with yourself. It's going to take some time. So now that I have you all ready to nail your next performances, I want to know what questions you guys have for me. And there's some water. But hopefully that was helpful. So, for more tips on combating specific fears, I have a couple of blog series for my job as a interior clinician. They're at thewoodwinmethod.com if you want to check them out. Otherwise, I would love to say hi, and if you would like those slides just to have for your reference, I would be happy to send them to you. Thank you for waking me up on this rainy and gross morning, and it's